When women take childbirth classes, it's better to take them from people who are teaching them privately rather than take them in the hospital package. Because in the hospital package, the anesthetist will come and give you a talk, the stem cell bankers will come, and maybe the insurance people, whoever you can think, because they are professionals sitting there and targeting pregnant women as a group.
This is the Birth Agni podcast, the fire that brings us alive, that burns myths and opens a channel of authentic natural birth stories. This show debunks the many myths of the medicalized births, showcases the plethora of choices a pregnant couple can make to embark on their empowered birth journey. I'm Divya Kapoor, a certified birth and lactation counselor and an aspiring traditional birth attendant. Let's get the flames blazing high. Some 40 years ago, in 1980s, the trend of cesarean sections in India was very, very different. And it was very different in terms of the medical interventions that were there in the hospitals. For example, in today's story, Nutan L Pandit, who is a seasoned childbirth educator, tells us that during her time when she gave birth, there were no ultrasounds. She had zero ultrasounds in her pregnancy, both times. And then in another publication where I was reading, it was mentioned that in April 1983, the cesarean section rate was 15.47% on an average, which means it would have been way lower in rural areas and government hospitals, whereas today the average is over 35%, which may seem low, but that's because a large population of India lives still in rural areas, townships, where there's no privatization, where there's no medicalization of birth, which is why the cesarean section rates are lower overall. Whereas if we look at private hospitals, and the data tells us that in the urban settings in private hospitals, the rate of cesarean sections is over 90% on average, which is unfortunate. And we are only reaping the benefits and we are not under the radar of WHO as of now because of the rural population. Now, when I dug deeper to figure out how things were in the 1980s, I came across the NFHS survey. The first NFHS, meaning the National Health Family Survey, was done in the 1990s, not before that. And it did not even account for surgeries. It doesn't have any data about cesarean sections from that time, meaning it would have not been a concern. The concern at that time was the death of girl child. The concern at that time was the lack of facilities. The concern at that time was the decreasing fertility. The problem at that time was people not doing family planning, which is why this survey came in. And in its first report, it says in 1990s that a whopping 70% of births were happening in home. So only urban women went to hospitals even then. Not all urban women also went to hospitals. In 1990s, not long ago, I was born a year before 19. I was born in 1989. Some 30 years ago, 70% of women in India were birthing at home. So as I'm reading through that report, it says that it was done by International Institute for Population Sciences, Bombay, from 1992 to 1993. The report came out in August 1995. And some of the things that I'd like to highlight is first the background. The background is that the National Family Health Survey is a nationally representative survey of ever married women aged 13-49. The NFHS covered the population of 24 states and National Capital Territory of Delhi to provide demographic and health data for interstate comparisons. The main objective of the survey was to collect reliable and up to date national level and state level data on fertility, nuptiality, fertility preferences, knowledge and practice of family planning, the potential demand for contraception, the level of unwanted fertility, utilization of antenatal services, breastfeeding, food supplementation practices, child nutrition, vaccinations, and infant and child mortality. So, the main highlight of this survey was fertility and the use of contraception or not. Um, and at that time, only 9% of rural households owned televisions and 32% owned radios. And what's interesting is that at that time also the fertility rate was reducing, although the age of marriage for women was 13, which was pretty low. And one of the things that it highlights is that 70% of women were birthing at home. The mortality risks were higher among women who birthed before the age of 20, which was very rampant then, not today, and wherein births followed an interval of less than 24 months, which is not as common today, was more common at that time. And the health facilities and the living standards have also improved overall. I would not say in terms of food, a lot we've lost over the years, and that's also we can debate on it at some other point. And 74% of babies were delivered at home, and only 34% deliveries were assisted by a doctor or a nurse or a midwife. That means many, many, many women were birthing unassisted among family with their mothers, etc. Only about one third of children are given solid, mushy food, in addition to breast milk, at the age of 6 to 9 months. And this also says that breastfeeding rates were good at that time. At least 3 to 4 months, everybody did breastfeed. So those were the certain things that I went through to figure out the difference between what happened back in 1990s, 1980s with respect to birth and today. And more about that difference will come through this episode today, where we sit down with seasoned childbirth educator Nutan L Pandit, who has authored 4 books and made several TV and speaking appearances, such as NDTV, Doordarshan. She's the founding member of Birthing the New Humanity. She also offers complementary healing modalities such as EFT and back flower remedies. She also trains and certifies childbirth educators now from her institute in Delhi, India. With her discussion, we will see how birth has changed over these years. Some of the differences that I found I've already shared with you here. But she has, from her own experience of giving birth, some significant differences that come out in this episode. She has also worked over 40 years as a childbirth educator. She's been a witness to the change in the perception of women uh, about birth, as well as the medical system, how it has changed over these years. So we will see what all has differed in terms of how we were back in those days to now. If you have been enjoying the podcast, here is an appeal to please drop a review or rating on Apple or Spotify to allow this podcast to be discovered by many more mums. This little effort from your side keeps this free resource alive and running. Thank you so much.
Nutan Auntie, I was thinking about the time you spoke to me first about when you began this work, maybe even before that, and you began way back in 1978. Correct me if I'm wrong. You learned about breath work, and that's something you used in your own birthing journey. And I remember you said when you went to the hospital eventually, the nurse said, "Oh, you don't seem to be in active labor," and you're like, "No, no, no, I'm just having my baby. It's right there." Tell us about that.
Yes, so I had learned classes in Delhi for breathing for labor. And when I was on the verge of birthing my firstborn, uh, and I said, I think the baby's coming. And she said, if the baby was coming, you would be screaming. And she looked at me very disdainfully and walked out of the room. And I said, oh my God, I have to scream to make her take me seriously. So I sort of said, how stupid can you get? How idiotic. And I'm thinking, how else do I scream? And so she came back just without making a noise. And when she looked, she could see the head of the baby. And then she panicked and she ran and, got things going to prepare for the birth. But she wasn't taking me seriously initially.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you give all the credit to the breath work you did.
Absolutely, because I was a very scared and terrified patient, which is why I took the classes because I was very terrified of the whole process. And I was so afraid of injections and doctors that when during my dental work I needed an extraction, they had to give me general anesthesia. They couldn't handle me otherwise. And I was so afraid. I said, my God, how is this going to be? How am I going to handle all of this? And that's why I took classes, and they served me very well. And so I thought if someone like me could handle it, anybody could handle it,
Wow.
given my history.
Wow. And from there on, you began teaching breathwork. And this person you took classes from was not from here. So even today, when we speak about breathwork and childbirth classes, people are still, I mean, they come up with a frown. Oh, is that a thing? We didn't know about it. And you began
Yeah.
your journey. So it's such an inspiring example of,
The lady I learned from was from Canada, Mrs. Mary Wood. Her husband was working at Gandhi Peace Foundation, and they were here for a short while. And I learned from her. She had just had her own baby, I think, with breathwork.
and then how did you begin this work of teaching other women breathwork? And then you went on to learn from London your own, yeah, childbirth. You became a
Yeah,
childbirth educator from a journalist. And
I just uh, taught cousins and friends who were pregnant. So I delivered in February, and my niece was due in October. So I taught her mom, my cousin sister, and then I taught my friend in Delhi who had a baby boy. And then I went to my obstetrician in Delhi. I had gone for my birth to Bombay, and then I went to the doctor in Delhi, and I told her I can teach if anybody wants to learn the breathing. And it was my aunt, actually, when I was helping my cousin. My aunt, that is my cousin's mother, said to me, this is what I should be doing and not looking for a job. But she was looking for a job at that time. And I thought, she really doesn't know what a job is all about. A job is about going 9 to 5 and about being in the office and stuff like that. And, oh, she doesn't know what she's saying. And I just dismissed what she said. Likewise, the first person who I taught the breathing to turned out to be French. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know French. How am I going to teach her? And they said, no, she's an American married to a French, so she speaks English. And while I was teaching her, one fine day, she just pulls out a book, in French. And she showed it to me, and she said, you can write a book like this. And like I had thought of my aunt, I thought of her thinking, how silly can she be? How can I write a book? I mean, what a crazy idea. But
oh,
I did eventually end up writing a book, and I thought it was her, as they say, blessing from the heart of her and my aunt that put me on this path. There was no such career at that time in this, and it was just something that happened very spontaneously, very organically, nothing planned.
and if you went on to write 4 books, which are so dearly loved by all of us, and they've been helping parents all this while. Speaking of spontaneity, and that's such a wonderful word. And I remember when you and I were talking before the episode, we spoke about how we've lost touch with the flow of things. How we are all in our clerical mind. We're all kind of always planning. And even when it comes to labors, one of the things you pointed out, which is so important for us to highlight here, is back in those days, labors were not as long as they've become today, and part of the process, I mean, one of the things that you highlighted again was that spontaneity is missing somewhere. So please help us explore this phenomena even more.
Well, I think today what has happened is there's an information overload. All the information is available to you at the click of a button, and we are not aware about the background of that information that we are getting online, because sometimes companies that manufacture products, will make NGOs and trusts that will put out information that will create a market for their products. Say, for instance, someone is manufacturing anesthesia, they will put out information on how painful the birth is. If someone is making a protein shake, they will put out information on uh, how less protein there is in the Indian diet or something like that. And you feel, oh, this is great information, and you feel you really need that product now. And also, nowadays, there are so many tests and so many ultrasounds. Now, all of these, what they do is they really frighten the daylights out of you because the thing is that a lot of things that the tests and the ultrasounds show us correct themselves with time anyway. So they just lead to stress in the mother. And this is why in 1985 and in 2005, the WHO stressed guidelines about technology not being a good thing in birth. Say, for instance, the fetal heart monitor makes the mother lie flat on her back for hours, and that causes fetal distress or less oxygen to the baby. In the same way, research has shown that when you pass ultrasound through
Mm.
muscles, through tissues, it causes enough light to be seen in a dark room and a bubble of air. So the heat from the light and the air bubble can disturb growing tissues of the fetus, especially at the early stage. And this bubble of air is medically called a cavitation. Cavitations happen, heat happens, light happens, but everybody says it's totally safe, go right ahead. And the ultrasound, the cesarean rates are higher because parents are so freaked out by the time the baby is born after going through all of this rigmarole of tests and tests and tests. And parents these days want numbers because they're all working. So they want to know, you know, what percentage of chance do I have of a normal delivery? How many hours will my labor take? How many days beyond my estimated date can I go? At what
Mm.
week is it safe to get the baby out? At what this and what that, and what schedule should I expect? It just goes on and on, but this is not a time to go into numbers. This is a time to flow and be spontaneous. Then they want a to-do list to know,
Mhm.
what am I supposed to do and not do. They don't at all think of going within themselves and seeing what do they feel like doing or not doing.
At this point, I wanted to go back and ask you, um, how many ultrasounds were done at your time, and what were the questions like for you when back in those days you were expecting, and what did you want to know? So, I mean, it's interesting that today we want numbers to everything. We
When
want
I
to.
had my first baby in 1975 and the second in 1978, ultrasound was just coming into India, and I had none by the grace of God.
Wow, both time
Thank
around.
goodness I had none, because if I had had an ultrasound, I would have panicked, I would have got frightened, because one baby was born with the cord around the neck, and one baby was born as a face presentation. Both of them, if I had had an ultrasound, I would have been panicked by saying, it's difficult, it looks difficult to have a normal delivery. So this overload of information, it comes
Mm.
back to an overload of information. We do not need an overload of information. So one overload of information we get is from all our investigative tests. Another overload we get is from surfing the internet. And it's just, you know, later pregnancies. People are having pregnancies later. So when they look up on the net, they look up all the threats involved in late pregnancies and fewer pregnancies. And There's just so much of fear mongering all around, as though birth is something so dangerous, and it's done by everybody, by people socially, sometimes even by professionals, and just all around media, books, everything, right? How often I've read in books about the cord being around the neck
Yeah.
and the baby can then, you know, choke or whatever. And so many babies are born with the cord around the neck. It's quite normal to have one or two loops around the neck.
Yeah, every second baby is has a chance.
Now, since all the women
Yeah.
are working, they want to be in control in their lives generally, and also in birth. It sort of spills over, right? The kind of way you are in one situation, you tend to be like that in other situations as well.
Mm. Back in those days, I'm curious. At that time, what did the doctor say? Was the doctor also kind of explaining it to women that it's gonna just happen the way it is supposed to be? We do not have a handle on all of this. It's a mystery. Yet it was a mystery yesterday. It's a mystery today. Now, I feel personally that it's something that the medical system itself has brought in. The idea that we can provide answers, the idea that a test can give you answers, the idea that you can actually terminate a pregnancy knowing that there's certainly an issue with your baby. So the lie was propagated to sell products, sell technology, but it is the medical system itself is facing the brunt of it at the same time. And we as professionals are also facing the brunt of it. But how was it back in those days? So there was no ultrasound. So the doctor used their hands, and the doctor must have known it's a face presentation.
So, well, I was pregnant in Delhi. I went to Bombay for my birth. I had the same doctor both times, and he was the most relaxed person. He had taken over the practice from his uncle. Dr. Ajankya was his uncle. Dr. Dhurandar, Jay Dhurandar was my doctor, and he was so relaxed. I think he had all that knowledge and information, and he was Dr. Ajankya's nephew, I think. So he probably grew up hearing about birth, and he was most chilled out, and so was my doctor in Delhi, thankfully. So none of my doctors did any fear mongering with me at all. And given my history of being afraid of the injections and all of that, if they had, I would have been totally frightened out of my mind, and I would have probably had a difficult labor as a result, because when you are fearful, your body does not work efficiently. The fear blocks you from relaxing
Yeah.
yourself, the fear blocks you from flowing with the birth process. So, therefore, I find it so important that women should learn how to relax and accept that this is a natural process, that this is not something very unnatural or very traumatic that's going to have happen to them. There's another thing I would like to say here is that when women take childbirth classes, it's better to take them from people who are teaching them privately rather than take them in the hospital package. Because in the hospital package, the anesthetist will come and give you a talk, the stem cell bankers will come, and maybe the insurance people, whoever you can think, because they are professionals sitting there and targeting pregnant women as a group and thinking, what can we sell to them? So, what I find is that women, when they take classes in the hospital, they are not told that there will be no milk initially for the first few days. And it is a medical fact that there is only colostrum in the breast which the baby can suckle and drink, and it's very good for the baby's health in the long term and in the present moment. It's full of immunities. It has a lot of fat. It helps the baby pass its first stool, reduces the chances of jaundice in the baby. All that information you'll get in private classes. In hospital classes, they'll tell you positions, they'll tell you stuff, and then when the baby is born, they say, oh, you don't have milk, you motivate the mother, you push the formula, and you push the breast pump, and it becomes a big mess.
Mhm.
But the knowledge you get in private classes is not targeted to making you buy more stuff or do stuff that is going to cause you more problems in the long run. So I would always say that take, if you have a choice, take the private classes. And then in the hospital, they also tell them that you having labor is like breaking 100 bones in your body at the same time. It's like fracturing, and that is horrific. And thank God nobody told me that. But then what happens is they say it's like that, but don't you worry, we have the epidural. So you see how you get uh, sucked into all the hospital protocol, as they call it. It's basically what rules the hospital has set for itself for its own gains. And I don't want you to be totally anti hospital, but unfortunately, that's how most of them are today because they're most corporate hospitals. And the target of a corporate is profit, it's not health. So you get sold the epidural, you get told if the labor doesn't begin, we will induce your labor, don't you worry. But there is no need to induce labor. Labor should be allowed to begin on its own when the baby is ripe and ready, when the baby is ready to be born, to be able to suck and regulate its body temperature. That is when the baby initiates labor by releasing hormones into the mother's bloodstream. So that's the best time for the baby to become.
Yeah.
If the baby comes on its own when the baby is ripe and ready, the baby is less likely to need support from the NICU. And women who worry, but what if I go 2 days over my due date, 3 days over my due date, which is a date of average calculation, it's not a date of appointment. If they don't induce labor, do they imagine they will be pregnant for a year or beyond a year? Labor will begin. I mean, how can you think, oh, my labor has not started? How many cesareans happen because labor doesn't begin? Because estimated date is taken as a date of appointment, which is also wrong. So wrong. Because women can conceive
Yeah.
at a different time in their cycle. A woman with a long cycle will deliver post her due date. A woman with a short cycle will deliver earlier than her due date because she conceives earlier because the gap between her menstrual cycles is different.
Mhm.
Other than that, if a woman has an orgasm, she can conceive as well, even if it's the safe time in her rhythm method of contraception. So the date really doesn't mean anything at all and should not be taken so seriously. And that is why maybe the rates of cesarean sections are rising because a lot of women plan their life around the estimated date. They've got to rejoin work or they've got to do whatever they need to do. And, they've planned their scheduling, all the timetable, the scheduling, the targets, all that comes in.
This brings me to a point, Nutan Auntie. I was reading this particular, I think, from Adam Grant. There's this quote that do not believe on somebody who's extremely certain about what they know. Rather, believe somebody who is thoughtful, who's thinking with you about what can
Mhm.
and cannot be. And this was so powerful because right now, all this, we can tell you that the due date is exact. We can tell you that if you go beyond that, it's going to harm you. All of this is eventually harming the entire process, but the perception of safety is strengthened with the lies that we know. And certainly, it's the brunt of it is being faced by the women who are undergoing surgeries, major surgeries. None of us would agree to any surgery for any other part of our body other than childbirth so quickly as we buy into surgeries for childbirth. And again, one, two, and then nobody tells us the downsides of anything because it's bringing in money. Um, Yeah, but at the
But
end of the day,
Divya, sorry, I'd like to
yeah,
say here that it is not only the woman who suffers the cesarean operation, it is the baby who suffers for the rest of its life as well. We forget that. And there's a very interesting quote by Dr.
yeah,
Michel Odon. He says that as violence in birth has increased, violence in society has increased because the way we are born is the
yeah,
way we live. So if we are born in bright, harsh lights and tubes are stuck in our airways and we are put on a cold weighing scale in order to be weighed, which is stainless steel in an air conditioned room, even an adult wouldn't like that, right? That sets a template on our impression of where we have landed, right? And we live the rest of our lives with that template, which gets engraved in our subconscious mind. If instead we are born in our own time when we are ready to be born, and instead of being placed on a stainless steel weighing scale, we are placed on the mother's chest when we are born, we experience her warmth. And so earlier it was thought that babies don't feel anything, but now research has shown they feel very acutely when they are born in the moments after birth. And the mother's
yeah.
breast smells of the amniotic fluid. So when the baby is put on the mother's breast, it not only experiences the warmth of her body, the baby also experiences the smell of the amniotic water, which is familiar to the baby. So the baby feels like, oh, I'm in some kind of gentle, warm, familiar place. Then the mother will talk to the baby. So the baby has heard the mother's voice in the womb. That is again familiar. The heartbeat of the mother, the baby will hear when placed on the mother's chest, and that is what the baby is hearing in the uterus as well. So it's so much more gentler and loving for the baby to be born and placed on the mother and not put through medical procedures and injections and aspirations and what have you, and eye drops and things. It just traumatizes the baby. And that is a trajectory that gets set in the baby's subconscious mind. Baby lives its life based on that, and that therefore also affects society and humanity.
That's a powerful perspective. We aren't even thinking of that yet. We haven't even reached there that an unborn child feels and then a newborn child feels as a whole human being. It has a soul, it comes with its own. Yeah,
Yes, I mean, some people believe in souls, some don't. But the violence is something we see very grossly in our society at the moment. We see the difference.
yeah,
And I also notice the babies who are put on their mother's chest as soon as they are born, they are they get amazing language skills. They speak big words and big sentences. You wonder where did they pick up this word from? They're amazing. They are so confident in themselves. They are happier. They cry less. So it's just the effect of natural childbirth is way beyond the mother's experience. When the baby gets born vaginally through the mother's birth passage, the baby picks up bacteria from the mother's vagina, which give the baby good health for the rest of its life. Babies are born sterile. They will absorb whatever bacteria they are exposed to. So, in the vagina and on the mother's breasts, nature has this plan of multiplying the microbes in these two places. So the baby gets seeded by these microbes, and then the baby has better health, better immunity for the rest of its life. The baby does not pick up infections from the hospital because the baby has its own mother's bacteria. So it also, baby swallows some of it, it goes into the baby's gut, and it gives the baby good gut health as well. There is something in breast milk called oligosaccharides, which are sugars that are of use to the gut bacteria. They are food for the gut bacteria in the baby's gut. So nature has planned for births to be natural and normal, and that should totally. These things are not spoken of. We speak
No.
of tests and what they show, and there's a cord, and the cord is thin, the cord is thick, and this and that, and it long and short.
Yeah.
Average cord is about 2 feet long. It can be smaller or longer also. Two cords are
Yeah.
often seen around the baby's neck, and these are the reasons that normally cesareans are done for, right? Cord around the neck.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
big
God, big
baby.
baby.
Oh, I better deliver you before the baby gets too big for a normal delivery is another thing that's said to mums.
Yeah.
But
And in a very inhuman way, the baby will grow like your father if the father is good-willed. I mean, that's stupid to say to a mother, and then we still buy into that.
whatever size the mother is, the baby will be in proportion to be born to her. Even if the father is
Yeah.
huge, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And the baby's head is the part that presents, and the baby's head can mold at birth if required. And
Yeah.
the baby's head is almost the same for every baby, small baby, big baby, um, Asian
Yeah.
baby, Negroid baby, Mongoloid baby, Caucasian baby, they're all the same.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and we can't even make out the difference between their weight. That the chubby babies are generally they have more with the brown fat. They have more survival into the world. They can thrive better if the baby is not very well. I mean, it's not right, like you said. At birth, the baby has more issues that we're going to deal with later. And that leads to another industry, the breastfeeding industry, which is thriving on the colic, the stuff, the gas, which is so much because the gut is absolutely devoid of what it could get in the beginning. And we're not even challenging.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Nutan auntie, how was it when your children were born? Were they brought to you? Were they put on your chest? I mean, I just want to draw that parallel that the industry knows, always knew how this happens and has um, sold itself.
When my first baby was born, he came before the doctor could come. The
Yeah.
nurse saw the head of the baby and rushed me to the delivery room. It was 9 p.m. and they tried to call the doctor, but the phones were dead. There were no mobile phones those days. Normally, the gatekeeper would go fetch the doctor in a taxi, but the gatekeeper had gone to have his dinner, so he wasn't there. So there was a resident doctor who delivered me, and the light was so dim. We had those old light bulbs those days, we didn't have these very bright LED bulbs those days. And while I was on the delivery table, and she just
Yeah.
looked. I don't know why I asked her. I said, "How did you decide to become a nurse?" And she started crying. And I said, "Oh, please don't cry."
While the baby is coming.
While she was shaving me for the dog, waiting for the doctor to come after the crowning, it must have been because I was crowning, I was taken to the delivery room. And then my baby was born very quietly and beautifully. Dr. D'Souza delivered me, the resident doctor. It was at Elizabeth Nursing Home in Bombay. And then brought him back wrapped in a flannel sheet, and I just touched his face. And then they took him away and got him to me in the morning. We didn't know so much about cholesterol those days. I think he was very hungry by the morning because when we were taking him for the feed from the nursery, he had his hands on his mouth and he was going. And when the second baby was born, I went to my because I was very upset with them for not getting my doctor on time. So I went to my
Hmm.
doctor's nursing home, which is where I was born also, and my mother had delivered all her babies. That was a Jane Care nursing home. And when I went there, they called him. They said he was in town, and I was in the suburbs of Bombay. So he said, "Oh, she dilates very fast. Give her pethidine." And so they came, and I said, "No, I don't want pethidine." And the nurse said,
Yeah.
"I know what I'm doing." She rolled me over and jabbed me in the hip. And after that, I became
Oh.
so woozy. I became so sleepy. I couldn't be
Uh,
very alert and awake. And I know now the difference in the drugged birth and undrugged birth is so different. It was so much better in the first delivery. And then when my baby was born, the doctor came and he said, push. And I was wondering, why is he saying it so loudly? I can hear him. He was saying, push. And everyone was saying, push. And then when the baby was born, and he said, I had planned not to give you an episiotomy, but I have to give you a little one because your baby was a face presentation. And I had no idea what that meant or anything. And then the next day, I called for breast for feeding the baby again. And my baby's face was so swollen because being a face presentation, the entire stress of labor came on his face. And I was like, I can't see the eyes. The eyes are swollen. This one straight line is for the eyes and the nose. There was no nose, nothing. The face was so swollen. I was, my God, my baby looks so strange. But then gradually the
yeah.
swelling went down, and then the neonatologist came to have a look at him to make sure he was fine. And yeah, so maybe to the women hearing this podcast, it'll sound like I delivered in very primitive times. And that time, neonatology has just started as a discipline. It was just pediatricians mostly, not neonatologists.
Brings me to the question, do we really need all of this? So the primitive times were better.
Yes, more people had normal deliveries. More people had normal, and people knew less. They exercised less. They ate more, and they had normal deliveries. They had no to-do lists, but they weren't working. See, women are now working. That changes. That's a game changer. Working, later pregnancies, mind working very actively, thinking very logically. Whereas in labor, you have to just flow with stuff and not think very logically.
It's a way of life that has changed culturally, like you were saying. Birth is cultural in a way that everything with birth impacts the humanity, the culture, the society, with the way children are being born today. Yeah, I think it's also become cultural with.
I think women are also very psyched up. Earlier, there were joint families, so there was not much fear of childcare or burden of childcare. Now
uh,
it's a total change of lifestyle when you have a baby. There's responsibility of raising a child, financial insecurity, relationships falling apart, insecurity. uh, then the insecurity of speaking to your doctor and she doesn't like what you say and she may be nasty with you. That's another insecurity which happens. Afraid of
yeah.
upsetting your care provider. Women have stopped trusting their intuition. They have stopped being in surrender. When you go to a hospital, your labor can stop because it's an
Hmm.
unfamiliar place and oxytocin doesn't it stops being released if the woman is in an unfamiliar place. Other than
Hmm.
that, if she's learned the breathing and she's handling labor beautifully, what
Hmm.
might happen is for a moment she might pause and she might ask herself, but this is easy. I thought labor was difficult. This is quite easy. What was all that noise about? So for a moment, the labor will pause. Her brain will rewire about her concept about labor, and then her labor will restart. Now, that is such an amazing insight, which was shared by a midwife, Elizabeth Davies, at a Primal Health Research conference in Hawaii in 2012. And she said, we just have to wait. How long the rewiring will take is going to be different for everybody. It could take hours, it could take days. We just need to wait and let labor happen in its own time.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to explain it and a very easy to in a very simple language. Something we call the surrender
Hmm.
to labor will happen on its own with the labor itself. Labor will do that to you as the hormones change, the cocktail of hormones change throughout. And with the intensity increases your pain killing hormones.
Right.
So you're also gonna experience the bliss with the hard work. So, something that women are not told today, that there is something that they can gain out of the experience. And
Yeah.
part of the feminist, yeah, the entire feminist agenda was women speaking up for themselves, not taking too much pain. But in all of that, what we forgot is this again became a propaganda used by the industry against us, our primal natures. That's something that we do for our babies. We are also going to gain out of that experience, but the stories have become way less. Um,
So when you have labor, you release endorphins, and you also release endorphins when you play a game or you jog, and it's the same thing.
yeah,
You're exerting, but you feel really good after the exertion. And you're exerting for pleasure.
yeah,
You're not exerting like lifting a log of wood or something like that to build a house. You're
yeah.
exerting because you love to play tennis or you love to walk or you love to jog. And you feel tired, but you feel good after it. That is a sign of the release of endorphins. And that happens in labor as well, if we allow it. If we allow it, if we
Yeah.
don't over medicate the labor, if we don't induce the labor, we have to give it a chance, right?
What do you think, Nutan Auntie, it will take now that the tables have turned uh, completely, I would say, in so many ways? Either women are birthing at home or a birth center. Only then they have a chance to experience the real primitive birth that you did in a hospital. But today they don't stand a chance with, against, like you said, information overload, the perception of we will tell you what it is every step of the way so you feel safe. And the problem with that is everything that is done to you is completely unsafe for you and your baby, and nobody's telling you that. So there's a bargain, but you're not told that you're really bargaining. So what do you think it will take today? We do need to take uh, either complete responsibility of our births because we don't have options, or face the humility, yeah, with the system and the
So,
trauma.
women need to really get the right knowledge about birth. What is normal? What is abnormal? Right? They have to, uh, they have to look around as to the right professional. After they have gained the knowledge, they should make a list of what they want or don't want, and then they should seek a professional who will allow. I hate to say allow, because how dare anybody allow you anything about your own body? I mean, who will be in synchrony with their requests
Yeah,
and be in
yeah.
allowance of their request. And
Mhm,
first of all, women have to do a lot of work on themselves. The first thing they
mhm.
have to do is start to listen to their own bodies. They should not say, I feel this, so I need to validate it from the doctor or from the internet or from someone else. Just start having faith in whatever you're feeling, because trust that your body knows what to do, and don't look outside all the time. No, there's a very interesting quote by Mark Twain who said, be careful of health books, you may die of a misprint. We have with us our intuition, which is always telling us what is best for us. It is telling us when we need to eat, when we need to sleep, when we need to change our position, uh, when we but there is so much noise these days in our heads that we need to actually sit down quietly and connect with what our intuition is telling us. Otherwise we miss the whispering of our intuition totally. Just like your
Mhm.
intuition tells you you have an upset stomach, eat light. You don't
Yeah,
have to get
even before.
validation from anywhere, right? You just know that because your intuition tells you. Likewise, intuition also tells you how to behave when you're in labor, how to move when you're in labor, how to breathe when you're in labor. All that your intuition is always telling you. And it is supported by hormones if we allow them to be released. That,
Mm.
the endorphin hormones, the oxytocin hormones, they tell us, they make us relax, they make us feel less pain. Then the muscles of
Mm.
the vagina are sphincter muscles. They open and close.
Mm.
They are designed to open and close. Just like the muscles of your eyes can open and close, of your mouth can open and close, of your vagina can open and close, of your anus can open and close. Every day when you pass a stool, the anus opens and closes again. And you don't think, oh my God, if I pass a stool, I'll damage my anus. You just do
Mm.
it without even thinking. Birth is
Yeah.
like that, designed naturally by nature. Nature even has a plan B by molding the babies, making the baby's head moldable in case the mother has a problem relaxing and allowing and opening up of her vagina.
Yeah.
So we have to tell women about these natural designs that are present in our bodies. There are hormones that relax our bones so that the pelvic girdle widens at birth.
Mm.
Then there are hormones that relax the pelvic floor at birth as the baby's head crowns. So we should talk of and empower women with this information, not with
Yeah.
information on tests and retests and weight of the baby and water level in the and cord around the neck or
Yeah.
not in the neck. And how can you know how can you know that this is not dangerous unless you're in the line of birth already and in the line of birth for a long enough time to have experienced this as not being a problem. And it's this, feeling that the doctor knows best and your intuition is zero. That is,
Zero.
your
Yeah.
intuition.
Follow the authority.
Yeah, intuition is not zero. Don't look outside. Your body is always telling you.
Mm.
Learn to listen to your body and have faith in your body because it is designed to give birth. You have to be in allowance, in flow, be relaxed, let things happen as they will, not be too much in the head.
What would you say to the men? Because the system is trying to scare us with all this information, and then sometimes the mother, when she connects with her intuition, because she's the one carrying the baby, she's the one feeling all of it, she's the one who gets those signals. Um, Unfortunately, men are trained to think logically. We women are primarily, I mean, primarily are have this nature of being feeling things, intuition, because
So,
we
men
bear
have to
children.
realize one thing, that they don't need to fix the mother's labor, they need to honor it instead, right? And they must uh, gather knowledge about what is natural, what is normal, what is not normal. Uh, I think it's important for them to know the signs in which labor will begin and when to go to the hospital. It's important for them to know that if the heartbeat of the baby is good within the normal limits of 120 to 160 beats per minute, there's nothing to be alarmed of, even if there's a color in the water, even if there's a little bit of bleeding. But if the heartbeat of the baby is fine, you're good to go. So they should be empowered with these bits of information that can help them then take decisions, because we want normal birth, but we also do not want a normal birth at any cost. Sometimes cesareans are
Mm,
necessary. When is that?
yeah.
Is what the dad should learn about. And I think
Mm.
reading, talking to people who are experienced, talking to the older generation about how was their labor. How was their birth? She wants a normal delivery. How can he support her in that? He can attend classes with her. He can learn ways he can make her comfortable in labor. He can learn about breastfeeding and not panic when the doctor says there's no milk in the first 2 days, because there isn't milk for anybody. Hey, come on. I read all about it. I know about
Mm,
cholesterol, and that's fine. So don't scare us. I mean,
mm,
I'm not saying you'll say that to the doctor, but in your mind, you can say, "Kiss, back off, stop fear mongering with me," right? And that you can do when
mm,
you know the
mm.
facts.
And you trust the facts by doing your own work after all this information has been given.
And be assertive. Don't be apologetic about asking questions. Don't be apologetic about making requests. Be assertive. Assertive people are open people. They are open to making requests. They are open to hearing arguments. They are open to changing their mind if required, if necessary. Don't be closed, and don't think saying yes or no means you won or you lost. It's not about your ego here. We are working for what's best for the baby, and the dad can support the mother in learning how to massage her in labor, learn the breathing with her. So if she panics, breathe with her, give her eye contact and breathe with her. And if he does that, in 2 or 3 contractions her panic will subside.
Where you were talking about intuition with an auntie, I had this feeling that there was this birth where this mother said that what happens if I hemorrhage, if there's a lot of bleeding after birth, would you guys handle that at home? And I was like, I mean, why is she asking me that?
Mm.
uh, and she good built, good, I mean, doing very well in labor. She ate a good meal in the middle of the labor. She was lying down, she was having a water, going to the washroom, everything. And when she birthed, there was hemorrhage. And that's when I went
Oh.
to the
Mm.
yeah, that's when I went to my teacher Kale and I said,
Mm.
she told me, she asked me, what if there's hemorrhage?
Yeah.
And Gail was like, damn, that's what they do. Mind. What do we do of mind? And intuition. Sometimes it's guiding us.
Where attention goes, energy flows, as they say. Flows. You can create stuff in your life by really feeling it in your gut and in your fear. So that's why it's so important to work on all your fears and work on all what is bothering you before you go into labor.
Yeah.
I do EFT with them sometimes, where we address fears and we tap them. It's an acupressure tapping technique. And sometimes I give them flower remedies if they're very fearful.
Mm.
But one thing I'd like to say here, that once a student of mine was hemorrhaging. I mean, I she had her twins, and then I heard that she hemorrhaged. Then I spoke to her, and it turned out one baby was born. While the other was being born, the doctor pushed the baby back and did a cesarean. And
Ah,
when she was in the recovery room, she started bleeding from her nose and her mouth, which can be a result of excessive oxytocin also.
yeah,
When pitocin,
yeah.
it is a side effect actually. So when they give you pitocin and stuff, very rarely do they talk of the side effects.
Mm.
Anyway, so I had once been at a workshop where someone had said that in the mountain areas where there are no doctors and medicines available, if someone hemorrhages, they press this point. And
Mm.
I had done a course in acupressure, so I said, before I tell them this point, let me check on my face acupressure chart. And it said this was the point, not this one, but this under the nose, between the nose and the upper lip.
Mm.
And so I told the dad, I said, press that point. She was in the ICU. Press that point for 5 minutes every half an hour. And he started pressing the point at 11:30 p.m. And by 3:30 a.m., she was out of the NICU. Oh, I keep saying NICU, sorry, ICU. Well, ICU.
Yeah.
So if somebody hemorrhages, remember this point
Mm.
under the nose.
Yeah.
So, this is the knowledge Thais had. traditional birth attendants had,
Yeah,
and we have lost it all
yeah,
by having the Janani Suraksha Yojana. The guys should have been absorbed into the Janani Suraksha Yojana. They should have been honored for the work they did so
all
selflessly. Guys used to hardly charge anything for their services. People would give them a sari and some rice, and they would be happy. And money, if they gave, they would be happy. Didn't give, they would still be happy.
yeah,
I mean, they have served humanity because considering the way you are born is the way you live. Not only have they served women, they have served babies and humanity for years. And we are losing all the knowledge. I mean, this, I just stumbled upon this knowledge. Probably there's tons of knowledge out there we're not even aware of.
tons. Especially in the Indian system, we have been able to some extent, document the midwives, the traditional midwives of other countries, especially from
No, we have this traditional knowledge is kind of ingrained in us. Like people will
uh,
say, "Oh, you have a cold, adrak ki chai pee lo."
right. Yeah.
है ना? "Oh, you have this, ये कर लो, वो कर लो." You have a problem, there'll be 100 nuskas, 100 people will tell you.
No, true that. And we are bringing midwifery. We are trying to bring midwifery to reduce our cesarean sections. Now that's a new problem we've created. But we are still bringing nurse midwives instead of, like you're saying, absorb the traditional low intervention, less drug based, less side effects based knowledge that will go with the generation that served um, all the people before us.
You know, it's so beautiful. There's this documentary called Born at Home. It is made by Janet Chawla,
Yes.
and it's about dyes and how they work. So there's a it's about Rajasthan where there's a lot of sand all over, not much water, right? So it's amazing how they take the sand from a clean area that is not a very frequented area, and they roast it on the fire, and they spread it on the bed, and then they put a cloth on it, and they make the mother lie. They put a cloth under it because it's a rope bed.
Yeah.
They put the sand on top, and they put another piece of cloth on top, and they make the mother lie on it. It'll be so comforting for the mother. It'll be like a bean bag feeling,
Yeah.
but warm. And then all the secretions are soaked by the sand, and the sand is buried, and so it'll also increase the quality of the soil.
Yeah.
And the placenta is buried in a corner in the house.
Yeah.
So you know, you give back to earth
Yeah.
everything, and that replenishes the earth. Now, one of the problems today we are having is that the quality of soil is going down.
Yeah.
And so, as opposed to that, dyes are now being sort of not given importance, and instead of that, women go to hospitals where they deliver on plastic sheets, and there's no touch feel thing that the dye has. There's injections, and there's internals, and there's, so it is so violent. Like Dr. Odo says, the more violent birth is, the more violent society is, and we are seeing that all around us right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. The birth trauma for the baby and the mother and the collective um, postnatal depression and everything else. It impacts relationships, the woman, the baby, the husband, the family, and it takes years to undo that one doing that we did. Years, because it's a collective fear. One thing that happens to a woman will send a signal to another woman to be more defensive, while this process wants more and more women to feel safe and open up instead of be extremely tight and defensive. And yeah, we're seeing that longer
So
labors, like you had said, even at home births, 2, 3, 4 days, we have women and we prep them. Do not think that you're going to have,
mm,
and it's good. We appreciate that if you have 3, 4 hours of labor, and it can happen, you can have 2 hours of labor, but let's prepare
mm,
for 2, 3 days as well. And it's not going to kill us. It's something
yes,
that will and the beautiful thing that you said, Nutan Auntie, right here, whatever amount of time, and it's so simple to explain. The amount of time your brain is going to take to rewire is the amount of time you're going to take to labor. And that's all of that is okay. All of that is a journey to unlearn and learn. And the process is a beautiful gift to bring us to the other side. Let's embrace that. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Nutan Auntie, for doing this with us. I'm so grateful that we could finally sit and have your, wisdom, all the experience that you've garnered all these years, and with the work you've done with so many women out there. Thank you so much. I feel so grateful to you.
Thank you, Divya. It was lovely to be on your podcast, and I wish you all good wishes with Birth Agni. It's a beautiful initiative.
Thank you.
Hope it does very well going forward.
Thank you so much.
There is a field beyond fear where the body is empowered to take on labor and birth. To land there, it is crucial to take birth education. To enroll into our unique labor and birth preparation course, reach out to us at www.birthagni.com or scroll through all available prenatal and postnatal preparation classes. Thank you for listening, all in the spirit of birth, womanhood, and freedom. Remember, you got the power. This podcast is about physiological birth and does not offer or claim to provide medical knowledge or diagnosis.
Now I can switch on my AC.
Yes, you can. Yes, please.
Oh, thank God I'm dying of heat.